Hi everyone. We'll be waiting 2 to 3 minutes before starting the webinar to accommodate for the rest of the attendees who are in the middle of connecting. Welcome everyone. I'm Balon Kulika and I'll be your host for today. Thanks for joining us and thanks for being part of our community. And just a few reminders before starting. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and it will be shared publicly. We will post the recordings on our community at aka.ms/security-webinars. During this time, please feel free to ask questions at any time by typing them in live event Q&A window and clicking on the Ask Question button. Be aware that any questions you post will be publicly visible. However, if you prefer, you can post your question anonymously by checking the box right below where you enter it. Now, we often get many questions on these webinars, and we will do our best to respond to all of them in real time. In the event, if the answer was not provided, or if you may have additional questions post this event, please don't hesitate to raise them on our Microsoft Cloud App Security Forum at aka.ms/MCAS community. If you're listening to this after the fact as a recording, that's also a great place to ask questions. Please join our community by visiting aka.ms/security community. That's the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements. On our community, you can speak directly to our engineering teams that create our security products. You'll be able to influence our product designs and get early access to changes by doing things like participating in private previews, which you can sign up for that at aka.ms/security private preview. And while you're there, you can request features, give feedback, review our product roadmaps, attend in-person events, or join webinars like this. We believe that the best way to improve our products is by removing any barriers between you and the people that create them. So we hope you'll join us. In today's session, Anisha will take us through enabling secure remote work using Microsoft Cloud App Security. Anisha Gupta is a program manager with our MCAS team. Without further ado, I will turn it over to her. Anisha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Valen. And thank you everyone for answering this question of do you use a CASB? Give us an interesting insight as we go into the presentation. I actually do have an additional question for you guys. We'd love to understand what best describes your relationship to Microsoft. Let's take a couple of minutes and I'll let you guys answer. You guys are pretty fast as well, so thank you. And MVP in this case is a Microsoft Valued Professional. All right, I'll give this one more minute. We're seeing kind of an interesting trend here.
This is kind of like playing a silent music, see those bars. It's just...
All right. I'm going to go ahead and close this out, but it gives us a good gauge as to how many of you are customers, partners, MVPs, and Microsoft employees. No matter what your relationship is, thank you so much for attending this session. And so let's get started. So today I'm going to be talking about how do you enable secure remote work with Microsoft Cloud App Security, which is one of our tools that we have in our Microsoft Security tool belt. Now, I do want to highlight that remote work is tough. It's tough for us too. And on top of everything, we have to address how do we secure our resources. Within Microsoft Security, we do have an extensive tool belt, and I'd be happy to share some of the blog posts and other tools that you can leverage during this time. In this session, I will double click into Microsoft Cloud App Security and how we can leverage this solution. So in this presentation, I'm going to start with going through an overview of Microsoft Cloud App Security, what it is, and how we can use this to be able to leverage all of its capability to enable that secure remote work. Then we're going to talk about two different scenarios here. How do we protect your data from user mistakes in real time? How do we protect your data from malicious actors with threat intelligence? And then how do these two scenarios come together to enable secure remote work? So let's go ahead and get started. Let's start by addressing the question of what is Microsoft Cloud App Security? Microsoft Cloud App Security is our Cloud Access Security Broker, or CASB solution. It's a uniquely integrated CASB, and it's really set apart because of all of the different Microsoft integrations that we can leverage within the Microsoft stack. You'll see here within the circle that we're able to leverage everything up from endpoint detection and response all the way to security workflow and automation. We're able to leverage all of these capabilities to enhance the core functionality for Cloud App Security, to be able to discover, monitor, and control your cloud resources. I'd love to highlight a few scenarios that we have here within our uniquely integrated CASB set. So our endpoint detection and response. We're able to leverage a unique integration with Microsoft Defender ATP, our endpoint solution from Microsoft, that you're able to get visibility at the endpoint itself. So any device that you'd like to be a corporate managed device, you can install an agent upon this. And what Cloud App Security does is it's able to leverage that endpoint layer and take a look into what of those applications that are being accessed from the endpoint layer. And do those applications need to be sanctioned or unsanctioned? And how can we go forward from there? I'll go a little bit more about the Microsoft Defender integration on the next slide as well. The next one I like to highlight is data loss prevention. So how do we prevent data loss from occurring? We actually leverage tools from Microsoft Information Protection. So for example, we're able to leverage Azure Information Protection classification labels to be able to encrypt files so that no matter where your file is being shared, and no matter which cloud resource it's going to, it's encrypted and protected. We're also able to leverage DLP engines from Office 365, which allows us to say, within the files that I have stored on my cloud resource, how many of these files have credit card information, PII information, and take a closer look within there. The third integration I want to highlight, and is one that I'm going to highlight throughout this presentation, is our identity and access management integration with Azure Active Directory. We're able to have this integration with Azure Active Directory flourish in a number of different ways. One being, from the identity layer, we're able to understand where is that user coming from and understand the user set, the user risk associated. A second way is we're able to take the identity protection layer from Azure Active Directory and funnel those signals within Cloud App Security. So is that identity, can it actually be a leak credential that's occurring? What are those risks that are associated with identity are then funneled in within Cloud App Security? So we're gonna go ahead and take an abstract look at all the use cases that Cloud App Security offers. So from the bottom up, what we see here is that within this remote work timeframe, your users are now coming from a number of different directions, whether they're coming in from their home Wi-Fi, or maybe a corporate unmanaged device, or maybe they're posing in as a bad actor. There's a number of new identities that are coming into your landscape. Now, if we go to the top here and see our cloud, what we're going to see is that all of these identities are accessing applications that we might not be aware of. So from left to right here, we start understanding what are those unknown applications, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Dropbox, or maybe it's a third-party file storage application that you didn't know exist. And that really, we're able to take a step back and say, let's discover the shadow IT or those cloud applications in my environment. Let's assess if these cloud applications are compliant. That third-party file storage application might not be compliant within our company and might have a number of security risks associated. So what we can do is take one step further and use our Microsoft Defender ATP integration to block access to that application from the endpoint itself, from the device layer. But let's say that we found our unknowns. Now we want to pivot to Office 365, Salesforce, applications that we want our employees to use. Well, these applications come with a high security standard and they're compliant within our organization. We want to take one layer and we want to take this one layer deeper and understand how do we protect the data on these cloud applications. We can do so by connecting these applications directly within Cloud App Security via the API. So let's take Box, for example. If we connect this as an API connector, we now have visibility in what files are on top of Box. What are those activities being performed within Box itself? We can take this one step further and say, within Box, if there's credit card information, let's encrypt or classify that content. Maybe we need to take an action in real time. We need to understand, based on where the user is coming from, we need to block access or block a download from occurring because we don't want our data to be exfiltrated into an unknown environment. While the application landscape is known, and you can say, now we have our unsanctioned applications, we have our sanctioned applications. One thing that's ongoing is are the cloud threats that exist in your environment. And so while all of this is going on, Cloud App Security is able to take it one step further and say, hey, these are some of the cloud threats that we see are going on in your environment, whether that's going to be an insider threat, or a compromised user, or maybe it's malware that could exist on top of your file storage applications, whether it being Box, Salesforce, or any of your sanctioned applications that you see here. So what we're going to do is abstract that diagram into two key remote use cases and focus in on both of these scenarios. The first one being is, what if your user accidentally leaks corporate data or exfiltrates corporate data? How do we protect that in real time? The second one being, what if we have a malicious actor coming into our environment? How do we detect and protect against them and other cloud native threats that they bring with them? So let's take a deep dive into that first scenario of protecting your data in real time. So that accidental data leakage I was talking about, why is this an important scenario? If you take a look at the stats above, 73 data records are stolen every second. If we take a moment to think about that, what if the last 73 items that you accessed were given to your largest competitor? What would you do? On top of that, we have 1,000 different cloud services that are used by the average enterprise. It's 1,000 different cloud services. Imagine the number of data that's stored on top of those applications. So what can we do? Well, let's think of a scenario. We have Sylvia, who is working from home, of course, and she's on her corporate managed device. All of a sudden, her corporate managed device is not functioning anymore. She needs a viable alternative. So she turns to her Surface Go tablet and decides to access corporate data from her personal device. What can we do to protect that any of the sensitive corporate data is not leaked onto that device or not put onto that device? What we can do is enforce granular monitoring and control for that risky session. In this case, Sylvia is accessing from a personal or unmanaged device for any type of web application. And so we can take a look in these data exfiltration and data infiltration scenarios on the left here. What we can do is block download on Sylvia's personal device, whether that's blocking downloads in general or blocking a download based on sensitive content. We can also apply an Azure Information Protection label on download, so we can encrypt that content if it's coming from any of these sources and making sure that no matter what is downloaded is secured and encrypted throughout. We can also block print, copy and cut, or we can block custom activities, like what you can see here on the right with Teams, where we were able to block a sending of a message that contains sensitive information. Or we can also block data infiltration scenarios, so information that's coming into the environment, whether that's through a block upload or a block paste. The upload scenario is very unique. We can also block upload of malicious file extensions, for example. There's a lot that you can do here, but let's go ahead and abstract this into that block sensitive content scenario. So we're going to take a look into the control itself, adaptive access control. Adaptive access control is a twofold control. One is it's really saying that not all sessions are created equal, and this will be a recurring theme as I go through this diagram. The second one is it's a constant cycle. You constantly have to adapt and evaluate based on where that user is coming from, where that session is, and if it is risky or not. So we start here with the identity, Sylvia. She's coming in from that unmanaged device, that Surface Go tablet I was mentioning earlier. Her session risk is deemed to be somewhat risky. It's actually going to pivot to Azure AD conditional access. So Sylvia's logging into an application. It's now going to be evaluated through Azure AD conditional access to see, hey, these are the conditions that we set to say this session is risky. So for example, if we're specifically looking at a particular location she's coming from, if we're looking at that unmanaged device, there's a number of conditions we can have here. What's going to happen next is the key or core point of this. is that not all sessions are created equal. So we're able to adapt based on the session risk that we see. Maybe we want to restrict that access to the application for Sylvia, or maybe we want to allow access and have her go through the Cloud App Security proxy, where she can then go and access the application. She'll be able to edit, view the document so she can be productive. But if she downloads any sensitive content, that's going to be blocked. Well, let's go through a demo and let me show you this in action. We're going to answer the question of what if Sylvia does download data to a personal computer? What's going to happen? So I pivoted to my demo here where I'm logged in as Sylvia on my unmanaged device. I'm starting off on the My Apps page within Azure Active Directory where I can see all of the different corporate applications I can access. I'm going to go ahead and click on Box. I am part of Contoso. I'm going to press Continue. So I'm performing my single sign-in here. And what you'll see is that this quickly switched into saying, hey, let's go ahead and log in through Azure Active Directory. My session was evaluated by Azure AD Conditional Access and said, hey, let's allow access, but let's go through the Cloud App Security proxy. And the way I can tell that I'm through the Cloud App Security proxy is if we look at the URL at the top. You'll see my box.com now has appended us2.cas.ms. So now we're in a session that has been wrapped and we're able to monitor if Sylvia accesses documents, if she's downloading confidential information, and any sort of sensitive actions that she's performing. So here what I'm going to do is I want to go ahead and download Project Saturn 2020. This document is actually a confidential document. And what I'm shown as an end user is saying, hey, this file that you attempted to download, it's marked as confidential. If needed, I can contact my admin through this email presented here. This message is customizable. So your organization can customize this in a unique way that alerts your end users and gives them the capability to reach out to you if needed. You'll see that I also had a tombstone file downloaded here. It's a block text file that again has that same customized block message as well. And so that's the end user experience. How am I able to configure this from an admin perspective? We actually pivot to the Azure portal. Now I'm as an admin, I've already navigated to Azure Active Directory, conditional access. I'm creating a conditional access policy here that I've already set in stone. We'll see here that I selected my name to route a select number of users through the Cloud App Security proxy. I can go ahead and select the users and groups. I can even select guest users and external users. So if I really want to scope this to a specific group, saying that I know these particular users are accessing this type of information, you can do so here. Then you can select the cloud applications that you want this to be enforced on. So we did select a number of applications as well as Box. Here's where you can set different conditions. That's where I was mentioning that we're able to determine the session risk based on these conditions, whether the sign-in risk is high, understanding which device platform Sylvia was coming from, the location she's coming from. She's coming from a browser or mobile application, or maybe the device state. We can also enforce some access controls as well, whether we want to require MFA before she goes to this particular application. And then we have our session controls. This is the key component that bridges that connection between Azure Active Directory and Cloud App Security. This use conditional access app control. This is our adaptive access control that we are able to set. And we have a couple of options here. We have monitor only, which allows us to get that visibility and wraps a user session in what actions is that user performing. Then we also have our block downloads, being able to enforce that session control of blocking a download right from Azure Active Directory. But if we want to go more granular than that, we can go ahead and use a custom policy, which we did in my case to block a confidential file on Sylvia's Box account. So if I go ahead and use a custom policy, I can pivot to the Cloud App Security Console. And within this Cloud App Security Console, I'm already in scope of a session policy. And this is what I can go and configure and customize to say, now I want to block a download of confidential labeled files when connecting from an unmanaged device. I can set a number of different activity filters here, whether it's going to be understanding if the device is compliant, domain joined, or a valid client certificate. Cloud App Security has the capability where you can upload certificate authorities right into the MCAS console. And then you can validate if there is a valid client certificate that your user is coming from. So it's a different way of doing device management. We can also select a number of different filters such as location. A lot of the things that you'll see are parallel to the Azure Active Directory conditions. So you have two different locations that you can set those conditions in. Here's where we get more granular of being able to set a file filter. So we have our classification label and we selected everything that's marked as confidential here. And what we want to do is we want to block that action. We want to notify the user by email, and we also wanted to customize our block message that you saw from that end user scenario. And we can create an alert. We can even send the alert to Power Automate, which will allow us to even extend this control and say, if I do block a user, send me a Teams message, send me a text message. There's a lot of different configurations you can have within Power Automate. I'd be happy to elaborate after the session. So what I showed you was what if Sylvia downloads data to a personal computer from both that end user perspective and the admin perspective. And so that covers our first key scenario of being able to protect your data anywhere in the cloud in real time. Let's now double click into our second scenario of being able to detect and protect against cloud native threats. So this really goes in hand of saying Microsoft is able to leverage that threat intelligence. We're able to leverage billions of data points to be able to understand what are the attacks occurring. We're able to reverse engineer solutions, and we're able to understand these are the threats that can exist in an environment. Let's be able to leverage this and put this in a tool so that other organizations can also detect these threats. We're going to pivot to why do we need to detect and protect against these cloud native threats, especially in the time of COVID-19. Attackers are getting smarter and they're not letting go. They're exploiting the situation, and we've seen that with the stats up here. On average, we see about 60,000 COVID-19 related phishing attachments or malicious URLs daily. There are over 70 plus malware variants that are now transitioning their messaging towards COVID-19 so that more users are now downloading malware onto their machines. Every single country has seen at least one COVID-19 themed attack. And so what we're seeing here is that attackers are exploiting this situation. And so what we're seeing is we are recognizing it, and what we need to do is push back. So a way to push back is we're able to equip you with detections across your cloud applications and your sessions. Within Cloud App Security, we have a number of different anomaly detections or built-in policy templates to really get an understanding of what's happening within your cloud environment. We see 4 categories here, and within each of the 4 categories, I highlighted at least one of the detections that we've seen to persist within our customer sessions, and you're able to go ahead and take action on, now that I've seen this alert and this threat, what can I do to stop this? So for threat delivery and persistence, we have a number of threats, whether it's a malware implanted in cloud applications, a malicious OAuth application, or suspicious inbox rules. Suspicious inbox forward rules, meaning that an attacker is able to go in, set this inbox forwarding rule so that now they get access to your data that's coming in from your inbox and are able to exploit it accordingly. You're also able to get indicators of a compromised session, whether that's activity from suspicious or anonymous IP addresses, activity from an infrequent country, login attempt from a suspicious user agent, or impossible travel. Impossible travel has been a key scenario that we've seen, and especially during this time, it'd be interesting to hone in on this particular alert to understand what are those impossible travel scenarios that are occurring and why are they occurring. Then we're also able to see a malicious use of an end user account. Within this, I highlighted unusual file download. Maybe we're seeing a mass download situation occur, or an unusual file download from an unfamiliar location. There's a number of different variants that you have between this file download. What we can do is connect it to our first use case and be able to block downloads if it's coming in from an unusual area. Then we have our malicious use of a privileged user. We're able to detect impersonative activities, administrative activities, as well as even go one step further and understand the multiple deletion of VMs. For the administrative and impersonated activities, we're able to look at where is that user coming from and are the actions they're performing sensitive. So for example, an administrative activities could be adding certain users into a role or into a group that has a higher privilege. And so we're able to take a step into understanding what are those activities being performed, are they consistent, and alert on this. So instead of me talking about this, let me show you. So what if a user, Jeff Leatherman in this case, has been compromised? How would we be able to leverage cloud app security to be able to see the different alerts that Jeff Leatherman have triggered and take a step there? So if we go to, now I'm in my cloud app security portal. I'm under our alerts pane. I've actually already filtered on Jeff Leatherman because he's been deemed as a suspicious user, but we want to understand what are those detections that have been alerted for him. So we see that suspicious inbox manipulation rule, see a mass download, impossible travel. I'm going to go ahead and double click on the suspicious inbox rule. What I'll see here is that I get context around Jeff Leatherman, where he accessed, which IP address he came in from, and understand a brief description of why this alert was created or generated, and understand information about the user itself. I can go into seeing the activities associated with this alert, as well as the users. And one thing that's interesting is if I go into the activity, I get a snapshot of Jeff and seeing how many open alerts does Jeff have, how many activities has he performed, where is his frequent locations. And if I want more detailed information, what I can do is go to the user page. Within Jeff Leatherman's user page, I'm immediately shown an investigation priority score. This is a priority score that helps us understand within our cloud app security console and our cloud environment, which users are deemed as more suspicious. And so we're able to filter on the investigation priority score to understand which user do we need to tackle or understand first. Along with the user investigation priority score, this is scored based on not only just Jeff's activities and if they're deemed suspicious based on Jeff's regular behavior, but if they're also deemed suspicious based on the organization or based on other peers within Jeff's organization. You can take a look here and we see a collective number of activities from that suspicious inbox manipulation rule to a logon that was actually performed on an Active Directory environment. So what we're seeing here is a collection of data, not just from Microsoft Cloud App Security, but also Azure Advanced Threat Protection, which allows us to get granular visibility and detect on the on-prem Active Directory layer as well. We're also able to see simple file accesses, seeing if the file was downloaded, and again, that impossible travel. So we have that collection of all the alerts here. If we see that Jeff has been a compromised user, we can also take action within the portal itself. We can go ahead and click within the user actions. We can confirm the user is compromised. This is a super powerful integration that we have with Azure Active Directory, where as soon as we click this button, Jeff's identity risk level, well, it's already high, will escalate to high, and this will force Jeff Leatherman to initiate a password reset for Jeff Leatherman, as well as require MFA for him again. With the confirming a user compromise, this really completes that story. And what we can actually do is bring in the two use cases together. So let's take a look at adaptive access control. Remember how I said that it's a twofold scenario. One is that not every session is created equal. Two is it's a consistent cycle. It constantly has to adapt based on where the user is coming from, and also what is the user risk associated. So what we saw in the demo for Jeff is we were able to confirm that the user was compromised and immediately initiate that that user had a high user risk. We can actually factor this back into the equation and not only have the session risk here, but also be able to restrict actions based on the user risk. So that as soon as Sylvia or Jeff goes through this process again, we can restrict access to the application based on new information we collected. And it's a consistent cycle that you'll see here that you can then modify based on certain actions that you want to enforce onto your end users. So what did we do in this session? Let me just recap and highlight a few takeaways from here. We went through an overview of Microsoft Cloud App Security and how it's a uniquely integrated CASB. Talked about how we can protect your data from user mistakes in real time with adaptive access control. Talked about protecting your data with malicious actors with threat intelligence, our powerful Microsoft engine that really allows you to understand what are those activities being performed. And I highlighted a few of the detections. I definitely would recommend that if you have Cloud App Security today, to go and connect your application and see those out-of-the-box detections already take place. Then we combined the two together and understood how adaptive access control and threat intelligence fit together to enable that secure remote work story, where we saw that we can go from blocking sensitive content in real time to also blocking access to the application based on if the user is compromised or not. My call to action to you is I'd love to further understand if these use cases that were presented today are relevant to you and your organization. I'd love if you could take some time to comment in the chat of if they were relevant, why or why not, or feel free to send me an email here. All right. I do have additional resources as well. I'm going to spend a few moments on that call to action slide and then take a look at the comments. Ryan and Valen, have there been any questions that have been left unanswered?
Yes, Anisha.
Mhm.
Thank you. There's one, somebody's asking, can MCAS recognize duplicates in the logs sent when filtering discovery on the global view?
I'd love to get some little bit more information there. So can MCAS get duplicates based on the discovery log? So being, I'd love to get an understanding of what those discovery logs are. Is it more so the proxy logs, firewall logs, and such?
Sure, we can move into the next one, and perhaps the anonymous user will submit more clarification on that one. So the next one is how can the user risk be included in conditional access app control? Will it be available as a condition in the CA or MCAS?
The user risk is currently in private preview with Azure Active Directory. So we'll be within the conditional access policies in Azure Active Directory.
Thank you for that. We'll go into the next one. When confirming a user is compromised or their authentication tokens are revoked, are they locked out of all systems until they complete password change and MFA?
So their account is essentially pivoted to they have to perform that password reset. So they are locked out before they have to perform that until they can move on and get access to their environment again.
Sure. Thank you for that. Moving on to the next one. Can you integrate CASP with on-prem apps using the API? And if so, is there a connector between on-prem app that is using NTLM basic authentication and CASP?
So there's two parts to this. For on-prem applications, the way that you could connect it with Cloud App Security today is actually leveraging the Azure AD App Proxy and then using our Any App onboarding process to be able to protect that data in real time. What this essentially does is it takes that on-prem application and makes it internet facing so that we can enforce controls on top of this. For protecting on-prem applications separately, I'd love to get your email and talk with you further about that scenario.
Sounds good. Moving on to the next one. From the point of view of MCAS, it enables conditional access app control to licensed users of Azure ADP1. Is Microsoft 365 Business Premium considered a licensed user of Azure ADP1?
Since that goes more into a licensing question, I can give a guide on what MCAS licensing consists of and also point you to the right person to get that question addressed.
Got it. Thank you for that. There's tons of questions coming over, and I will just like to quickly post here our Q&A overflow, as I'm sure all of these questions, hopefully they'll end up into the MCAS community. So I'm going to quickly post this here. And let's pick a next question here. How much data ingestion is expected per user from Cloud App Security into Azure Sentinel?
So that's a specific question on, I'd love to kind of get a little bit more detail on that as well. We do have an integration with Azure Sentinel where you'd be able to connect we have a specific Microsoft Cloud App Security connector available within Sentinel. Today, you can enable MCAS alerts to funnel in within Sentinel. You can also enable discovery data to be able to be funneled within Sentinel as well. As far as a specific data point and getting a baseline, that's something that is dependent on your organization. But yeah, I'd love to connect and get a better understanding of what specifically you're looking for in that integration.
Thank you. So this is relevant to an environment that is coming from an anonymous user. However, I am afraid to deploy it now without having enough experience or know-how. What should I do?
For that, we have a number of resources available online. Along with this recording, we have a number of recorded sets to go through that deployment process of what it takes to enable that real-time control or be able to understand those anomaly detections. We also have 2 to 3 minute deployment videos. If you go to, actually, let me go ahead and pivot to the resources. These are a few of our links, as well as licensing options for that question earlier, that you're able to go and explore further. If you do need, if you have a specific question when you're enabling cloud app security, feel free to reach out to me as well.
Perfect. Well, there's lots more questions coming in, and the team is helping out here. And again, we posted for the link for the Q&A overflow. We'll just go through some reminders before wrapping up here the webinar. So our next scheduled webinars are on, we actually have back-to-back next week with Azure Sentinel. April 20, we have the MSSP and distributed organization support. And then on the April 22nd, threat hunting on AWS using Sentinel. And then we have on May 13, again, Azure Sentinel using Sigma to accelerate your SIEM transformation to Azure Sentinel. All about this, as I have posted the links before for registrations and recordings. We have a one-stop shop that we use, aka.ms/security webinars. And we're also finalizing our May-June webinar schedule, and once the dates are confirmed, we'll update the same website for the save the dates for the audience who is interested to join. So thank you, Anisha, for an excellent presentation. And thank you so much for the rest of the team who helped answering the questions. And most of all, I want to thank you, all of you, for being a part of our community and for joining us in these webinars. And we hope to see you next time. Goodbye.